West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Dr. Maya Angelou once famously said, and you know this quote, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Note the silence of their leader, Kevin McCarthy, over his fellow Republicans' often extreme and racist rhetoric. The brazenness of two Republican elected officials duking it out on Twitter, and the chokehold the former guy has over the grand old party today as people plead the fifth to protect him. This silence is just the latest in an appalling display of the Republican Party's inexorable slide to the right. Luckily, the earth isn't flat. Most of them would have fallen off by now. David Brooks may have described it best in his latest Atlantic article for The Atlantic. Quote, over the past few decades, there have been various efforts to replace the Reagan paradigm, the national greatness conservatism of John McCain, the compassionate conservatism of George W. Bush, the reformicon conservatism of the D.C. think tanks in the 21st century. But the Trumpian onslaught succeeded where these movements have so far fizzled because Trump understood better than they did the coalescence of the new American cultural corporate elite and the potency of populist anger against it. Joining me now, Stuart Stevens, senior advisor at the Lincoln Project and author of It Was All a Lie, and Michael Steele, former chair of the Republican National Committee. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Welcome back to the Sunday show. So, I know I just read that block from David Brooks's really terrific piece in The Atlantic, but I must get you both to respond to what Marjorie Taylor Greene said in that opening sound where she says like she's the base. And I'm hard-pressed to say that she's wrong. Stuart?
Look, among many of the painful things about being a former Republican is having to agree that Marjorie Taylor Greene is right. She is right. It's not that Donald Trump has if I could say, a stranglehold on the Republican Party. Donald Trump is the Republican Party. No one forced the Republican Party to become what it has become. It is what it wants to be. And I think that's a hard thing for a lot of us. It certainly was for me to come to grips with, which is why I wrote this book. The Republican Party has become a white grievance party for the most part that is fueled by a sort of anger at what the country is becoming because the country's changing, which is antithetical to the concept of America as an evolving melting pot, the shining city on a hill. That's not the America they see.
Mm-hmm. And to that point, Michael, and I want to get your view on MTG in a moment, but it dovetails nicely with something else that David Brooks wrote in that piece in The Atlantic. He writes, there is something extremely off-putting about the NatCon public pose. In person, as I say, I find many of them charming, warm, and friendly. but their public posture is dominated by the psychology of threat and menace. If there was one expression of sympathy, kindness, or grace uttered from the podium in Orlando, I did not hear it. But I did hear callousness, invocations of combat, and whiffs of brutality.
Yeah, I think you can dress it up, but it still is what it is. I mean, that is the root, at the root of what animates and motivates, to Stuart's point, the grievances. This is about a changing country, the dynamics involved in that. It's about identifying the enemy, the opposition, to own. And so we're going to own the libs. When you read David's piece, which is an incredibly good piece, very insightful, and the way he describes their talking about these NatCons talking about liberalism, large L liberals, like AOC, et cetera, they're like the horny deviled creature that you must eradicate. It is a very important shift away from the last 60 or 70 years of politics, both here in Washington and around the country, where these polar opposites actually kind of worked in synchronicity. They kind of played off each other. Now you're in a position, and this is true on the left as well. So the interesting thing for me and my takeaway, I could see a lot of the narratives playing out on the left, and that's why in the 2016 and the 2020 cycle, especially in the 2020 cycle, you could see this emergence of sort of the left and the right around certain anti-government, anti-corporate America ideals. And this team seems to have tapped into that beyond Trump.
Right. And actually, to my mind, what you just said was more at play in 2016 when you had Bernie Sanders supporters who then switched over to Donald Trump and vice versa. They heard something for themselves in both those guys. We can't talk about the future of conservatism without talking about Kevin McCarthy, who has the title of House Minority Leader, but he's not really leading. And I want to play another more sound from Marjorie Taylor Greene, where she talked about Kevin McCarthy. Listen.
Kevin McCarthy has a problem in our conference. He doesn't have the full support to be speaker. He doesn't have the votes that are there because there's many of us that are very unhappy about the failure to hold Republicans accountable, while conservatives like me, Paul Gosar, and many others just constantly take the abuse by the Democrats.
Oh, boo-hoo. My God. So much victimhood here. But Stuart, what she says, again, is not untrue. Kevin McCarthy has a problem. To my mind, his being silent on all these things, he might help Republicans get the majority, but if he thinks he can control them, if indeed Republicans become the majority, he's got another thing coming, doesn't he?
For years, when Michael and I were involved in the party, we always said that it was a mistake to try to negotiate with terrorists. And that's what Kevin McCarthy's trying to do. If Republicans take over the House next year, which odds are they will, they're going to put Kevin McCarthy's head on a spike. They're not going to elect him speaker. He isn't what they want to be. He's a guy who's sort of like a rush chairman who's trying to sort of make everybody happy. It's not going to work. They want a warrior, somebody like Jim Jordan is going to be Speaker of the House. And that's what Americans need to really focus on. It's not going to be some domesticated, nice version of republicanism that if they take over the House. It's going to be people like Marjorie Taylor Greene are going to be running the House of Representatives of the greatest country in the world. And you got to ask yourself what that means.
Chairman Steele, as a former chair of the RNC, your job was to help find candidates and help them win. Speaker Jim Jordan, a lot of those folks on Capitol Hill. The likelihood of a Speaker Jordan
is a lot higher than the likelihood of a Speaker McCarthy. I think Stuart is exactly right. I think the underlying thread for a lot of the folks inside the Republican caucus is. They've looked at, from Boehner to Ryan to now McCarthy, a sort of feckless leadership that is not prepared to engage the Nancy Pelosi. They see an AOC as much more as a potential leader on the left than they need someone to counteract that. So you can't play nice with that type of strategy. So absolutely, Kevin McCarthy is kind of whistling past his own graveyard when he thinks that this caucus is going to turn over the leadership if the House turns Republican next year, that he's automatically going to lock that down. She's sending him the signal now, bro, you got a problem that's not necessarily fixable.
It is Monday, the 6th of December of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is, River City Ash Mondays. What day is it? It's Monday, so it's River City Ash Mondays. We made it through a weekend somehow. Boy, I was really happy when the former guy ostensibly left his position as, autocrat of the free world. And because I really wanted my weekends back. But now it seems that it's slowly creeping back. And what is it? Well, the Nazi takeover of the United States of America continues apace. How is that evidenced? Well, we shall see, shall we not? Now, some of you might have heard about this march in D.C. on Saturday by the guys from Charlottesville. All of a sudden, they were called in Charlottesville the Vanguard something, or the something Vanguard. And because one of their members had, killed Heather Heyer with his car, driving through a parade. They changed their name because you have to remember the term dapper Nazi was applied to this group and a few others as well, who coalesced in Charlottesville to surround a synagogue with tiki torches and rotate around while chanting, "Jews will not replace us." Happy Hanukkah, by the way. So these guys changed their names to Patriot Front, advertised for quite a while that they're going to march on D.C., and they weren't really hiding who they are. Now, I know they wore masks, but that was because when they were whatever Vanguard in Charlottesville, they were identified, and many of them have been going to jail. In fact, we have a trial right now with the crying Nazi, Cantwell. So for some reason, there's this gaslighting that was going on over the weekend, and actually I think continues today on this particular incident, that wasn't who you think it is. Those are feds. Those are guys from Quantico. Look, they're all dressed in khakis. Well, remember the dapper Nazis? Polo shirts, khakis. And they were interviewed in the back of the U-Haul and Ryder rental trucks, which is illegal to do, by the way. You're not supposed to ride in the back of those trucks. And using ham radios that ostensibly you're also not supposed to use unless you have a license. And it's only supposed to be for natural disasters and emergencies. Not for, overthrowing the United States of America, because that's ultimately what their game is. So they took out a permit. They marched with a police escort, by the way. I was wondering, would Black Lives Matter get a police escort? Or would they get, police violence? I think it would be police violence. They'd be shot with rubber bullets or worse. But these guys get a police escort because it was, they pulled out a permit. And then they didn't have enough trucks to take all their crew away. So the gaslighting on social media was horrendous. I mean, I actually got notification from Twitter saying, you're getting a lot of notifications here. You want us put up some filters? I considered it, but I didn't. I just wanted to see where it would go. And I literally got thousands of touches, shall we say, from bots, trolls, real people saying, you're sheeple. You don't know what's really going on. Those weren't really Nazis. Those were the feds. All right. By the sheer volume of the response, you know that the Nazis are scared because they got found out. And this coordinated effort isn't going to work. We punch the Nazis and then we punch them again. We have to embrace that idea. When I say punch a Nazi, I don't mean go up to a Nazi necessarily and punch them in the face. No, you punch them in the wallet, you punch them with the law, and you punch them so that they're scourges on American society and they have no place here, even when applying for a parade permit with police escort. Now, I understand why people would say, oh, well, those were cops, because there's a lot of cops in the Nazi movement here in America. Does not necessarily mean that it's sanctioned by we, the people. If they show you what they are the first time, believe them. As Maya Angelou has said, and we all know that quote. Even Capehart used it today. Well, yesterday, but I'm using it today. Why would we question that? Also, ostensibly from people that are, I don't know, in their bios they said they were liberal. I don't know. Sure seemed like a lot of troll bot stuff going on there. And I got to tell you, now Sue from Rockville has, quite a few numbers in her, or maybe it's Kathy, has numbers in their bio. But that's I would say maybe a rarity, but it's an exception to this rule. And the rule is if somebody has a bunch of numbers in their bio, it's suspect. Yes, it is suspect, and we should. So the Nazis marched on D.C., and we can joke about how buffoonish they seemed, wearing their gator masks. That was another argument. They're wearing masks. MAGA doesn't wear masks. Yeah, well, they conveniently do. But I got to tell you, paramilitaries the world over wear masks. And I posted pictures of paramilitaries in Florida. I mean, county sheriffs wearing masks way before the pandemic. Paramilitaries the world over, including here in the United States of America, have worn these gator masks when going out to apprehend people, because that's what paramilitaries do. They do not want to be identified. That's why they cover up their badge numbers. It's useless to cover up your badge number if you're not going to cover up your face. Come on. What do you think they teach in police academy? Openness? Hell no. So, those were not cops, though they may have had some cops in their ranks. Yeah, they look like a bunch of frat boys. Exactly, they're dapper Nazis. Which also beggars the question. You can find the Turning Point USA Club president. You can find the Proud Boy Club president. You can find the 3%er Club president. You can even find the Patriot Front Club president on every single American college and university. But you can never find the president of the Antifa Club anywhere in the world in any university. But Antifa gets blamed for everything. People are trying to say, oh, that's Antifa. That's not MAGA. It's Antifa. MAGA. Hey, actually it's maggots. Okay? That's the proper term. Am I dehumanizing them by comparing them to a grub? Yes, I am. I saw Faces of the Enemy. I'm tired of being nice with Nazis. I'm not having a Christmas truce with the Nazis this year. Excuse me. Which reminds me, my maggot brother has made it very clear that he's not going to be taking part in the family holidays this year because he doesn't like my politics. My politics. And I was thinking, what made him think he was invited in the first place? Because he's a maggot. And I guess the maggots, well, I don't know. Should I be getting so personal about my brother? I think I'm pissed off that even in my own family, my immediate nuclear family, I have to put up with this bullshit. The Nazis, with Russian help, I gotta tell you. Now, we all knew it, and it's coming out again, corroborating what we all knew. That effort has splintered even down into the nuclear family here in America, and that's exactly the gambit they wanted to play and exactly the result they wanted and got. Civil War, exactly the same dynamic, splintered the families right down the middle. Brother against brother, sister against sister. I don't know, it was husband against wife. That's usually a given anyway. You don't need a civil war to have that. Yeah. And then, of course, we had the oral arguments about Roe v. Wade from the Mississippi case. And I think what the GOP has been saying all along is that zygote lives matter more than yours be. Do I say that out loud? Well, it's sarcastic, but maybe people will get the wrong idea that I might embrace the term. I do not. Oh, confession should be made, though, in the overarching aspect of all of this. I have not been a nice guy my whole life. I've used the B word. I harbored weird misogyny. Even though I wanted my sisters to excel, I kind of did the locker room bullshit for a while. I will say, maybe in my defense, it always felt icky until I got brave enough to actually say, hey, this is stupid. And I wasn't very old when it came to be. Thinking that the worst insult that you could tell a guy was that he was a woman or a fag. I was quite young when I finally came to the realization that, I would never think about using the N-word. Why would I be prejudicial and bigoted towards another human being because of their condition, their being, whatever, their gender? Why would I do that? Didn't seem very American to me because I didn't embrace the part of America where they said, oh yeah, we're supposed to do that. We're supposed to keep women as chattel slaves. We're supposed to have all these other people as our inferiors. I didn't embrace that part of America because I never thought that was America. If we're going to throw off the shackles of the royals, why would we want to pick up the chains of the slavers? Oh, I get to be a king now and treat everybody like shit. No. That's not what representative democracy is. And apparently my maggot Nazi brother doesn't like my politics because I believe in equal protection due process for all. He cannot wrap his brain around the idea that if somebody from another country here is violated, like in a crime, that they have the same rights as anybody else who's a citizen of the United States of America. They don't believe that should be. Because they are not Americans. They were not trained or educated in what it means to be an American. Truly, they think being an American is being the slaver. And if those people are not acquiescing to your will, they're uppity. And they need to be put in their place. or just the cruel glee that they have just to inflict pain upon another person, or what they think is pain on the liberal. And I've told my brother before, I'm not a hippie that you can kick. I am the older brother, by the way. I'm a punk, and punks kick back. It's about time that we stopped being hippies and became more like punks. We need to punch the Nazis. We need to kick back. And you know what I mean. I'm still nonviolent. But look, you can only turn the cheek so many times before you have to defend yourself. Okay, perilous times. Yes, we are. We are in perilous times. But we also have a curated show for you today so we can center our being. You know, reignite that divine spark that every American should experience. Well, I'm not getting that divine spark ignited by Dr. Oz, because that guy's an effing quack. Yeah. He's going to be selling that colloidal silver stuff. I actually think that's what he's auditioning for. Not to be a U.S. senator, but he wants to be the spokesman for colloidal silver. Well, on the menu today, of course, we started at the top that, you know, Speaker Jim Jordan is becoming more likely than Speaker Kevin McCarthy if the Republicans take back the House. That should activate us enough, but we've already been activated because it's worse than even that. Yes, it is. On the rest of the menu, a Ninth Circuit judge has had it with a Trump judge's insulting dissents. A Tennessee appeals court ordered a new trial for a black man convicted by an all-white jury that deliberated in a room full of Confederate symbols. Oh yeah, we're post-racial, aren't we? And far-right secessionist Ammon Bundy told Idaho court officials that time he has spent campaigning to become the next governor should count toward the community service he was ordered to perform. These snowflakes are so entitled. God. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the phones of 11 U.S. State Department employees were hacked with spyware from Israel's NSO group. They get around. And China's communists bashed U.S. democracy just before this week's Biden summit. Well, they're joining the Nazis in an effort here. Who knew? We all did. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Page at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link. And of course, the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link that is near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the left, all the way across there is the link to our Patreon site. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it helps us pay our bills, continue upgrading the machinery, the hardware that continues to, well, fall apart, and also the needed software and all the rest of the attendant needed materials that are required. That's why they're needed to continue this powerhouse of resistance that is Netroots Radio. For almost 11 years now, we've been continuously broadcasting this resistance powerhouse 24/7, 365. And though the bulk of what we do comes out of our own wallets, we would be unable to do it without you. And we thank you for your generosity. Now, for those of you who don't know, if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, and if you could afford to send those funds to us once a month, it helps us pay our bills, as I mentioned, and that somehow allows us to fly under the radar and continue what we do. And what we do is a civic duty, and we take it very seriously, as the founders originally intended, oh so many years ago. So thank you to those of you who have continued to be so generous with us. It really does help. But as costs go up, I hate to say it, but we need even more help. So thank you for that help, and we will pre-thank you for your generosity in the future to those of you who would consider so. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, ably, I might add. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary, incidentally, on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime, and really try to get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms before showtime. Sometimes it's while the opening clip is playing. I apologize, but that's how it is when you're scrambling. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, I guess, so far. We'll see what's going on at the end of the month. Jeez. Talk about costs going up. Anyway, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. All right. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of Above the Law by Joe Patrice. Judge Lawrence Van Dyke of the Ninth Circuit is an unqualified hack. The ABA already alerted everyone to the former. His infancy of a judicial career so far confirmed the latter. As a Trump appointee to a federal appellate court, though, Van Dyke has excelled in the modest task which is his charge, writing vitriolic town hall editorials to publish on the court. Following up on characterizing his colleagues on the court as criminals, something he actually did, Judge Van Dyke wrote a grandstanding dissent ripping the Ninth Circuit over gun regulation, and at least one member of the court has had just about enough of this horse hockey. The exchange, highlighted by Howard Bashman, comes in Duncan v. Bonta, a challenge to California's ban on large-capacity magazines. Actually, it's Bonta. Judge Van Dyke blasted the majority for upholding the regulation as a minor burden upon the gun rights of Californians. In a separate dissent, Van Dyke took the time to cite the James Madison quote about judges not being angels and used that as a springboard to declare the majority possessed. If you've already called them criminals, you gotta up the stakes somehow. Amidst all this, Judge Andrew Hurwitz wrote a pointed concurrence that comes as close to saying shut your pie hole as a respected federal jurist can get. I join Judge Graber's opinion for the court unreservedly. I ordinarily would not say more, but I am reluctantly compelled to respond to the dissent of my brother Judge Van Dyke, who contends that the majority of our court distrusts gun owners and thinks the Second Amendment is a vestigial organ of their living constitution. That language is no more appropriate and no more founded in fact than would be a statement by the majority that today's dissenters are willing to rewrite the Constitution because of their personal infatuation with firearms. Our colleagues on both sides of the issue deserve better. It may not be appropriate, but I'm not so sure that that isn't an accurate description of the dissenters. It is, and that was the author of the article interjecting there. Back to the judge. I recognize that colorful language captures the attention of pundits and partisans, and there is nothing wrong with using hyperbole to make a point. But my colleague has no basis for attacking the personal motives of his sisters and brothers on this court. His contention that prior decisions of this circuit involving different laws and decided by different panels somehow demonstrate the personal motives of today's majority fails to withstand even cursory analysis. But if he wasn't capturing the attention of pundits and partisans, how will he get a book deal? We've got to keep our priorities straight here. Back to the judge. Indeed, members of the court not among today's dissenters have firearms in their homes. Members of this court not among today's dissenters have volunteered for service in the active military or the National Guard. You know, the modern, well-regulated militia, and bore arms during that service. Well, what's this well-regulated militia he speaks of? Is that like mentioned in the Second Amendment? It would be really weird if something that important might be rendered surplusage. Seriously, though, in Van Dyke's dissent, he unironically writes, "It is telling that comparisons between the First and Second Amendment in this latest case have largely been dropped by the majority and relegated to concurring opinions, likely because it gets embarrassing and wearisome to constantly rationalize what we treat or why we treat the Second Amendment so differently than its close constitutional neighbor." And then Van Dyke capitalizes because he's screaming, I guess. "Because no one says make no law, and the other goes out of its way to qualify the right based on a state's right to organize a militia." Not to get all originalist or anything, but this is why George Washington rode out to whoop ass on a bunch of yahoos stockpiling guns 3 years after the ratification of the Second Amendment. Their original understanding was always people can have guns for the purpose of joining the state militia, because back then recruits were expected to bring their own weapons to the fight. But this protection does not apply if you're operating outside that structure. On that note, I've said before, and I'll say again, the author of the article, by the way, some states should just make private gun ownership, including law enforcement and other civil servants for this purpose, contingent on the owner giving the state the National Guard standard of 1 week in a month and 2 weeks a year in service. If the gun owner is not fit for combat, there are plenty of administrative, logistical, and humanitarian relief jobs where the National Guard could use help. Just force the textualists and originalists to stare at the words of the Second Amendment and openly say, "We don't care what text or original even means." Associated Press staff bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. A Tennessee appeals court has granted a new trial for a black man who was convicted of aggravated assault by an all-white jury that deliberated in a room containing Confederate symbols. The Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals ruled on Friday that Tim Gilbert deserves a new trial on charges stemming from a December 2018 altercation. Gilbert was sentenced to 6 years in prison. 6 years in prison after his conviction on charges of aggravated assault, reckless endangerment, unlawful possession of a weapon by a convicted felon, and resisting arrest. His attorney appealed, arguing that Gilbert's right to a fair trial was violated because the jury deliberated in a room adorned with an antique Confederate flag and a portrait of Confederate President Jefferson Davis. Why not just put Bin Laden's picture up there? Jesus. The appeals court ruling came after a circuit court judge denied Gilbert's motion for a new trial. The appeals court ruling said that allowing the jury to decide whether Gilbert was innocent or guilty in a room at the Giles County Courthouse maintained by the United Daughters of the Confederacy, exposed the jury to extraneous prejudicial information, and violated his constitutional rights to a fair trial conducted by an impartial jury. The trial court also made a mistake by allowing a challenged witness statement, an error that cannot be classified as harmless, the appeals court said. More staff at the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Far-right activist Ammon Bundy says time he has spent campaigning to become the next governor of Idaho should count toward the community service he was ordered to perform after being convicted of obstructing police during his trespassing arrest at the state capitol. Aaron Welling, Bundy's campaign treasurer, wrote last month to court officials that Bundy has completed 1,621 hours of public service, citing what appear to be campaign activities. In the letter, submitted with Bundy's gubernatorial campaign letterhead, Welling said the candidate has traveled the state while encouraging people to, quote, become more active in holding public officials accountable, end quote, and that Bundy also encouraged people to register to vote. That's community service. Bundy attracted international attention when he led a group of armed activists in the 2016 occupation of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in Oregon to protest federal control of public lands. You know, where some ranchers burned down a forest to cover up the poaching of deer. He went to protect their rights, and in the process took over federal buildings, terrorized the people in the community, which he still has his minions doing to this day, just like the KKK writers of old. And now he's in Idaho, because Idaho just isn't extremist enough. He filed paperwork to run in the crowded Republican primary for Idaho governor next May. Incumbent Idaho Republican Governor Brad Little is also expected to run, but has not decided yet. And, of course, we know Idaho is among the most conservative U.S. states and has not had a Democratic governor since 1995. Now, according to Idaho's criminal code, sentencing may include the rendering of labor and services to charities, governmental agencies, needy citizens, and nonprofit organizations. The conviction stemmed from Bundy's arrest on August 25th of 2020 when he refused to leave a state house auditorium after officials ordered it to be cleared. Officers said Bundy also went limp and refused to stand and put his hands behind his back. Officers ultimately wheeled Bundy out of the Capitol building on a swivel chair. And the arrest came during a special session of the Idaho legislature calling for lawmakers to address issues related to the coronavirus pandemic. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again. From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Beyond the Label. F. Scott Fitzgerald once said, "The rich really are different from you and me." But in House of Gucci, director Ridley Scott challenges that and seems to say that while they may have more money, the rich still struggle with similar issues, especially family. Based on true events, this one tells the real-life drama of Maurizio Gucci, a scion of the family famous for their namesake brand of luxury goods, and his untimely death at the hands of his ex-wife Patrizia, who took a hit out on him after he left her for another woman. Since the case was highly publicized, we already know the who. Scott is looking at the why, at the slow turning, as it were. He accomplishes this, though at times the movie can feel soap opera-ish. The cast saves it from falling into camp, especially Lady Gaga, who plays Patrizia as a woman who really liked nice things, but nonetheless, at least initially, seemed to really love her husband, played by Adam Driver, and to be of help to him and his business. Scott skillfully navigates the class issue implicit in the story, the snobbery and disdain that the Guccis feel for Patrizia's nouveau riche background, leaving it to say all about the Gucci's social anxiety. The chemistry between Gaga and Driver's characters work, with solid support from Jeremy Irons, Al Pacino, and an over-the-top Jared Leto as the black sheep of the family, and who's responsible for some of the movie's funniest moments. Add the amazing wardrobe of 80s designer clothes straight from the Gucci archives, and House of Gucci is a fun look at how the 1% lives. Those of us who will never be in the perimeter of that world can take comfort in the adage, money can't buy happiness, but it does make for an interesting story. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
You are listening to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. An important event in the establishment of limited government occurred in the year 1100. In that year, King Henry I, the son of William the Conqueror, seized the throne when his older brother, William Rufus, died under suspicious circumstances while hunting. Henry's brother, Robert, was away on a crusade. Robert probably had a better claim to the crown and had the support of some nobles. So, upon his coronation, King Henry issued his Charter of Liberties, which guaranteed certain rights to the nobles and the church, in effect, buying their support. The Charter of Liberties was important because, in theory, it placed limits on the king's power. This precedent would later be referred to in the creation of the Magna Carta in 1215. That's all for today's podcast. The show's theme song is Complacent by Cheryl B. Englehart. You can find Cheryl online at cbemusic.com. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day an explosion rocked Fairmont Coal Company's No. 6 and No. 8 coal mines in Monaga, West Virginia, killing 367 miners. Newspaper reports estimated the number of dead to be as high as 500. It is considered the worst mine disaster in the history of the United States. Most miners were killed instantly, as the explosion destroyed the mine entrance and its ventilation system. Those not killed instantly suffocated from poisonous gas. Earth tremors were felt 8 miles away. The force of the explosion buckled pavement, collapsed buildings, and derailed streetcars. More than 3,200 miners had died in 1907. There were 3 more mine disasters before the end of the year. The last month became known as Black December. In January, a coroner's jury verdict ruled that a blowout shot ignited coal dust and made a number of recommendations for safer practices. But David McAteer tells a different story in his history of the disaster. He argues that the tipple had a design flaw that led to occasional coal car derailments as they exited the mine. And on this day, there had been a derailment with coal cars crashing at the bottom of the shaft and taking out the electrical and ventilation systems with it, igniting the coal dust in the process. The disaster generated a surge in demands for greater mine safety, leading to the creation of the Bureau of Mines in 1910. The Bureau could conduct research and safety training, but were powerless to conduct inspections or safety enforcement. Miners would continue to fight for the better part of the century for safety regulations and enforcement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And we're currently having a little bit of a light rain shower, and we are forecast to have steady light rain this morning, with showers continuing through the afternoon, bringing with it, a little less than 1/4 of an inch of rain. And that should happen, well, it should be happening all day. And then cloudy skies tonight, then will become partly cloudy after midnight. Winds will be light and variable both day and night. And tonight should be bringing with it some scattering bit of rain, and then intervals of clouds and sunshine tomorrow. Highs near 51. And winds will be light and variable. Oh, our high today should only be about 45, by the way, so a bit chillier than normal. Though, well, when I say normal, chillier than what we've had here lately during the day. Now, confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County have increased once again, because that's how they are here. They don't care. And you know who they are. These are only updated totals to the beginning of Friday, and we'll get updated totals for the weekend late tomorrow, probably after showtime. But confirmed cases have now increased to 251,005 people, and our deceased have increased by 3 to 363. Pollen right outside the window here in Rogue River proper is rated as none. The air quality index, though, is good at 15 parts per million, and we continue. Oh, I guess they took the air stagnation alert off. Good. And that daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.23 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles, and relative humidity is at 100%, because it is raining. And there it is. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 44 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 44 with rain. Rome is 50 degrees and fair. Kyiv is 33 with light rain. Kabul is 37 degrees and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 58 and clear. Tokyo is 51 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 68 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 48 degrees with their incessant fog. And New York, New York is 52 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Alan Sutterman, Eric Tucker, and Frank Bajak of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The phones of 11 U.S. State Department employees were hacked with spyware from Israel's NSO Group, the world's most infamous hacker-for-hire company. The employees were all located in Uganda and included some Foreign Service officers. Said the person, who was not authorized to speak publicly about an ongoing investigation. Some local Ugandan employees of the department appear to have been among the 11 hacked. The hacking is the first known instance of NSO Group's trademark Pegasus spyware being used against U.S. government personnel. It was not known what individual or entity used the NSO technology to hack into the accounts or what information was sought. Senior researcher John Scott Railton of Citizen Lab, the public interest sleuths at the University of Toronto, who have been tracking Pegasus infections for years, called the discovery a giant wake-up call for the U.S. government about diplomatic security. For years, we've seen that diplomats around the world are among the targets, he said, and it looks like the message had to be brought home to the U.S. government in this very direct and unfortunate way. There is no exceptionalism when it comes to American phones in diplomats' pockets.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Ken Moritsugu of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. China's Communist Party took American democracy to task on Saturday, sharply criticizing a global democracy summit being hosted by President Joe Biden this week and extolling the virtues of its governing system. Party officials question how a polarized country that botched its response to COVID-19 could lecture others and said that efforts to force others to copy the Western democratic model are doomed to fail. The harsh rhetoric reflects a growing clash of values that has been thrust into the spotlight as China rises as a global power. The question is whether the U.S. and other leading democracies can peacefully coexist with a powerful authoritarian state whose actions are at odds with the Western model that emerged victorious at the end of the Cold War. The pandemic exposed defects in the American system, the deputy director of Communist Party's Policy Research Office said. He blamed the high COVID-19 death tolls in the U.S. on political disputes and a divided government from the highest to the lowest levels. Neither China nor Russia are among about 110 governments that have been invited to Biden's two-day virtual Summit for Democracy, which starts on Thursday and will address strengthening democracy, defending against authoritarianism, corruption, and human rights. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.